Welcome to the Makaryev History Channel. Subscribe and leave a review about the story at the end of the video. My name's Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, my brother Caleb was my closest friend, my shield, my partner in crime. We weren't just brothers, we were a team. Life hit us with a rough hand early on. Our parents worked long hours, leaving us to fend for ourselves most of the time. Caleb, being the older one, always took care of me. He taught me how to throw a punch, how to fix a flat tire, and how to lie convincingly when we got into trouble. Everything was simple until Lily came into our lives. Caleb met her first. He was volunteering at a charity event our mom guilt-tripped him into attending. I still remember how he came home that night, eyes shining like he'd won the lottery. "Ethan, I met someone," he said. He went on about her wit, her smile, how she made him laugh in a way no one else ever had. I was happy for him. Caleb deserved someone good. He'd sacrificed so much for me over the years. The next few months, he was happier than I'd ever seen him. They were inseparable. I was glad. Until the day we officially met. It was a chilly autumn evening. Caleb invited me to a game night at Lily's place. The moment she opened the door, I understood why he was so smitten. She was effortlessly charming, with warm brown eyes that seemed to look right through you. We clicked instantly. It wasn't intentional, it just happened. We shared the same love for obscure indie music, and she laughed at my dumb jokes in a way that felt genuine. I tried to ignore the growing tension in my chest every time she smiled at me. She was Caleb's, not mine. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. One night, Caleb had to work late, and Lily asked if I wanted to keep her company. We spent hours talking, laughing, sharing stories we'd never told anyone else. Felt wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from being drawn to her. The real trouble began when Caleb proposed. He was nervous, asking me for advice on how to pop the question. I plastered on a supportive smile, even though it felt like someone was crushing my chest. He proposed under the stars in the park where they had their first date. She said yes. I should have backed off then. I tried. God knows I tried. But avoiding her only seemed to make things worse. One fateful night, after too many drinks at a mutual friend's party, we kissed. It lasted just a few seconds, but the damage was done. We both pulled away, stunned, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. For weeks, guilt consumed me. I couldn't look Caleb in the eye without feeling sick. Meanwhile, Lily and I agreed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but feelings don't vanish that easily. Then Caleb found out. I came home one night to find him waiting on the porch, fists clenched, face pale with betrayal. "Is it true?" he demanded, voice shaking. Couldn't lie, not to him. "Yes," I whispered. The fight that followed was brutal. Years of brotherhood shattered in a flurry of punches and shouted accusations. He stormed off, leaving me broken and alone. Weeks passed. I reached out, but he ignored every message. Mom noticed the change but didn't press for details. The loneliness was suffocating. Then came the accident. A late-night phone call. Caleb had been in a car crash. My heart stopped. I rushed to the hospital, fearing the worst. When I got there, he was bruised but alive, stubbornly refusing to let the doctors fuss over him. For the first time in months, our eyes met. "Why are you here?" he asked coldly. "Because you're my brother?" I said, choking back tears. "I messed up. I hate myself for it. But you're still my brother. You'll always be." Silence stretched between us until he let out a bitter laugh. "You're an idiot." "I know." And just like that, the walls began to crumble. Took time. A lot of time. We weren't the same, but we were still brothers. We chose forgiveness, not because it was easy, but because letting go of each other was impossible. Lily moved away not long after, leaving both of us behind. Maybe she couldn't handle being the wedge anymore, or maybe she just needed a fresh start. I'll never know. But Caleb and I, we found our way back. Bruised, scarred, but unbreakable. Years later, Caleb and I run a small business together. A garage we always dreamed of owning. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. We still argue, still make stupid mistakes, but we face everything together. One day, a familiar face walks into the shop. It's Lily. She looks different, older, wiser, but still with that unmistakable spark. "Hey," she says softly. Caleb and I exchange a glance, and for the first time in years, there's no bitterness, only acceptance. "Hey," I reply. Some stories don't have endings, just new beginnings. But nothing could have prepared us for what came next. Two strangers in dark suits walked into the garage, flashing badges. "Caleb and Ethan Matthews? We need to talk." Their expressions were grim, leaving no room for questions. And just like that, the past we thought we'd left behind came crashing back into our lives. The agents introduced themselves as Special Agents Wright and Garcia. Their tone was sharp, professional, and unforgiving. "We have a matter of national security that involves your family." Caleb and I exchanged wary glances. We'd survived so much already, but whatever this was felt far more dangerous. "It's about your father," Agent Wright said gravely. "He's alive, and he's in serious trouble." Caleb's face paled. "That's impossible. He died when we were kids." Agent Garcia opened a thick folder, sliding an old photograph across the table. It was unmistakably our father, older, scarred, but very much alive. "He's been running for 20 years. Until now." Before we could process the shock, the garage door creaked open again. A shadowy figure stood there, battle-worn and fierce. His voice, though raspier and harder than I remembered, was painfully familiar. "Boys, we don't have much time." We didn't have time to ask questions. The distant wail of sirens mixed with the pounding of my heart as we sprinted down the alley behind the garage. Dad led the way, his movements quick and purposeful, as if he'd done this 1,000 times before. Caleb and I followed, exchanging uncertain glances but saying nothing. There was no room for hesitation now. We reached an old, rust-covered van parked at the edge of the alley. Dad yanked the sliding door open. "Get in," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. As soon as we were inside, the van roared to life. Caleb sat up front, still gripping the wrench like it was his lifeline. I collapsed into the worn back seat, breathless, my mind racing with questions. Dad sped down the narrow streets, navigating like he had every turn memorized. "They won't stop," he muttered half to himself. "They never do." Caleb finally snapped. "Who the hell are they? What's going on, Dad? You owe us the truth." Dad's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "I know you want answers. You'll get them, but not here. Not now." Before Caleb could argue, Dad slammed on the brakes, skidding into an abandoned warehouse lot. The place was dark and desolate, forgotten by time. He killed the engine and turned to face us, his expression unreadable. "I never wanted you dragged into this," he said quietly. "But after today, there's no going back." The weight of his words settled over us like a heavy blanket. Caleb clenched his jaw. "We've been living in the dark for 20 years. You owe us more than cryptic warnings." Dad sighed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. 20 years ago, I uncovered something dangerous. I thought faking my death would keep you safe." His voice cracked. "But they found me, and now they've found you." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Who are they?" "An organization known as Dominion," he said bitterly. "Powerful, merciless. They control governments, corporations, everything. I was one of them, until I discovered what they were really after." Caleb and I exchanged stunned looks. This wasn't just some conspiracy theory, this was our reality now. Before we could process it, the sound of distant engines echoed through the warehouse. Dad jumped to his feet. "They're here." Caleb grabbed the wrench again. I found an old crowbar lying near the van. We weren't ready for this, but ready didn't matter anymore. The warehouse doors groaned as they were forced open, spilling harsh light into the darkened space. Shadowy figures moved with military precision, weapons raised. Dad drew a pistol from beneath his coat, his eyes fierce and unyielding. "Stay close," he ordered. "No matter what." The first shot rang out, splitting the stillness. There was no turning back now. Our father's secret war had become ours. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire and shouts echoing off the warehouse walls. I could barely hear my own heartbeat over the chaos. Caleb and I stayed low behind a rusting metal crate, gripping our makeshift weapons with trembling hands. Dad moved like a man who had spent his whole life surviving. His pistol barked with deadly precision, each shot deliberate and controlled. He took down 2 of the advancing figures before ducking behind a stack of old shipping pallets. "Flank them!" a harsh voice commanded from the shadows. The attackers were organized, tactical, and far better equipped than we were. Caleb nudged my arm. "We can't just sit here," he hissed, eyes blazing with determination. Before I could argue, he bolted toward a side path, moving with silent agility. I cursed under my breath and followed, praying we wouldn't be seen. The dim light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that made the whole place feel like a twisted battleground. Caleb spotted an old storage locker near the far wall and motioned for me to help. Together, we shoved it over with a loud crash, blocking one of the entry points. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire peppered the crate inches from my head, sending shards of rusted metal flying. We hit the ground hard, breathless but still alive. Dad's voice rang out from across the warehouse. "Fall back to the van. Now!" I grabbed Caleb's arm, dragging him to his feet as we sprinted toward the van. Another explosion of gunfire erupted behind us, but we didn't stop. The old van came into view, battered but still running. Just as we reached it, 2 attackers emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. They moved with cold efficiency, rifles raised and ready to fire. Time seemed to slow. I thought it was the end, until Dad appeared like a vengeful spirit, dropping one with a precise shot and tackling the other in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. "Get in the van!" he roared, wrestling the masked figure to the ground. Caleb and I scrambled inside, slamming the door shut behind us. The engine roared to life just as Dad delivered a final crushing blow, leaving the last attacker unconscious. He dove into the driver's seat and floored the gas pedal, tires screeching as we tore out of the warehouse lot. The city lights blurred into streaks of white and orange as we sped down deserted streets. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Caleb stared out the window, face pale but defiant. Dad's breathing was ragged, his grip like iron on the wheel. "They won't stop coming," he said grimly. "We need to disappear." "Disappear where?" Caleb demanded. "They know who we are now. We have one option left," Dad said through clenched teeth. "There's someone who can help, if she's still alive." I frowned. "Who?" His expression darkened, old memories flashing behind his eyes. "Your mother." The world seemed to tilt off its axis. Caleb and I stared at him, stunned into silence. "She's alive," Caleb whispered, his voice breaking. Dad's gaze stayed fixed on the road ahead. "She never died. She went underground to protect you." A new wave of questions crashed over me, but there was no time to ask. We were running out of road and out of time. The van roared down the highway, tires humming against the worn asphalt. Silence filled the cab, thick with unspoken questions. Caleb sat stiffly in the passenger seat, gripping the worn armrest with white-knuckled intensity, while I stared blankly out the back window, still processing what Dad had just said. Our mother was alive. "She's the only one who can help," Dad repeated, his voice strained but resolute. "If Dominion knows you exist, she's the only person left they fear." Caleb shook his head slowly, disbelief etched into his features. "You expect us to believe she's been alive all this time? Hiding, while we thought she was dead. I didn't expect you to believe anything," Dad said grimly, eyes locked on the road. "But she's the reason you're still breathing." My mind reeled. I remembered vague fragments from my childhood. A soft voice singing us to sleep, the smell of lavender, the warmth of her embrace. Memories blurred by time, lost in grief and faded photographs. "Where is she?" I asked quietly. Dad hesitated. "Off the grid. Deep," he exhaled sharply. "But if she knows Dominion's after you, she'll find us." Before we could respond, the faint sound of helicopter blades cut through the air. My heart dropped. Caleb twisted in his seat, eyes wide. "We're being tracked." "Hold on," Dad barked, yanking the wheel hard to the right. The van skidded off the highway onto a narrow dirt trail, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Tree branches clawed at the windows as we careened deeper into the forest. Suddenly, gunfire erupted behind us. Bright flashes lit up the darkened woods, piercing through the trees like searchlights. "They're too close," Caleb shouted. Dad clenched his jaw, eyes blazing with determination. "We make our stand at the ridge." We broke through the trees into a rocky clearing overlooking a steep cliff. The van skidded to a halt, and Dad jumped out, motioning for us to follow. "Take cover." Caleb and I dove behind a cluster of boulders as Dominion operatives swarmed the clearing, their boots crunching on gravel. "End of the line, Matthews!" A cold, distorted voice rang out from the darkness. Dad stepped forward, gun raised but outnumbered. His breath was steady, unshaken. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." Suddenly, a distant explosion rocked the ridge. Flames burst through the trees, scattering the operatives in confusion. Caleb and I exchanged stunned looks as a cloaked figure emerged from the smoke. A fierce, battle-hardened woman with piercing eyes that burned with defiance. "Get away from my family," she commanded. "Our mother." The operatives faltered, recognizing her instantly. Panic spread through their ranks as she raised her weapon, covering us. "Move," she ordered. Dad sprang into action, pulling Caleb and me to our feet as gunfire erupted once more. We ran, hearts pounding, feet skidding dangerously close to the cliff's edge. Behind us, our mother fought with lethal precision, holding back the enemy with the skill of someone who had been fighting this war far longer than we ever imagined. We reached a hidden trail carved into the cliffside, scrambling down toward the safety of the forest below. Caleb grabbed my arm, his voice breaking. "Is this real?" "It is now," I gasped. From above, another explosion shook the ridge. For a fleeting moment, I saw our mother standing tall, fierce and unyielding, a warrior in the firelight. And then, silence. We kept running, no looking back, no time for goodbyes. The war that had started long before we were born was now ours to fight. Our family was broken, but together we were unbreakable.